and as to the length of time for which those relations lasted. But she was so much worn out that he did not insist. "Am I to come back to morrow?" she asked. "No, it's not necessary. I will let you know all that Steinweg says. May I see you down to your carriage? These 3 flights are rather steep." He opened the door and stood back to let her pass. At that moment shouts were heard in the passage, and people came running up, inspectors on duty, office messengers, clerks. "Chief! Chief!" "What's the matter?" "Dieuzy!" "But he's just left here." "He's been found on the staircase." "Not dead?" "No, stunned, fainting." "But the man who was with him, old Steinweg?" "He's disappeared." "Damn it!" He rushed along the passage and down the stairs, where he found Dieuzy lying on the first-floor landing, surrounded by people who were attending to him. He saw Gourel coming up again. "Oh, Gourel, have you been downstairs? Did you come across anybody?" "No, chief." But Dieuzy was recovering consciousness and, almost before he had opened his eyes, mumbled: "Here, on the landing, the little door." "Oh, hang it, the door of Court 7!" shouted the chief detective. "Didn't I say that it was to be kept locked? It was certain that, sooner or later...." He seized the door handle. "Oh, of course! The door is bolted on the other side now." The door was partly glazed. He smashed a pane with the butt end of his revolver, drew the bolt and said to Gourel: "Run through this way to the exit on the Place Dauphine." He went back to Dieuzy. "Come, Dieuzy, tell me about it. How did you come to let yourself be put into this state?" "A blow in the pit of the stomach, chief." "A blow? From that old chap? Why, he can hardly stand on his legs!" "Not the old man, chief, but another, who was walking up and down the passage, while Steinweg was with you, and who followed us as though he were going out too. When we got as far as this, he asked me for a light. I looked for my matches. Then he caught me a punch in the stomach. I fell down and, as I fell, I thought I saw him open that door and drag the old man with him." "Would you know him again?" "Oh, yes, chief. A powerful fellow, very dark-skinned, a southerner of sorts, that's certain." "Ribeira!" snarled M. Lenormand. "Always Ribeira! Ribeira alias Parbury! Oh, the impudence of the scoundrel! He was afraid of what old Steinweg might say and came to fetch him away under my very nose." And, stamping his foot with anger, "But, dash it, how did he know that Steinweg was here, the blackguard? It's only 4 hours since I was chasing him in the Saint Cucufa woods. And now he's here. How did he know? One would think he lived inside my skin." He was seized with one of those fits of dreaming in which he seemed to hear nothing and see nothing. Mrs. Kesselbach, who passed at that moment, bowed without his replying. But a sound of footsteps in the corridor roused him from his lethargy. "At last! Is that you, Gourel?" "I found out how it was, chief," said Gourel, panting for breath. "There were 2 of them. They went this way and out of the Place Dauphine. There was a motor car waiting for them. There were 2 people inside. One was a man dressed in black, with a soft hat pulled over his eyes." "That's he," muttered M. Lenormand. "That's the murderer, the accomplice of Ribeira, Parbury. And who was the other?" A woman without a hat, a servant girl, it might be, and good looking, I'm told, with red hair." "Eh, what? You say she had red hair?" "Yes." M. Lenormand turned round with a bound, ran down the stairs 4 steps at a time, hurried across the courtyard and came out on the Quai des Orfèvres. "Stop!" he shouted. A victoria and pair was driving off. It was Mrs. Kesselbach's carriage. The coachman heard and pulled up his horses. M. Lenormand sprang on the step. "I beg 1,000 pardons, madame, but I cannot do without your assistance. I will ask you to let me go with you. But we must act swiftly. Gourel, where's my taxi?" "I've sent it away, chief." "Well, then, get another, quick!" The men all ran in different directions. But 10 minutes elapsed before one of them returned with a motor cab. M. Lenormand was boiling with impatience. Mrs. Kesselbach, standing on the pavement, swayed from side to side, with her smelling salts in her hand. At last they were seated. "Gourel, get up beside the driver and go straight to Garches." "To my house?" asked Dolores, astounded. He did not reply. He leant out of the window, waved his pass, explained who he was to the policeman regulating the traffic in the streets. At last, when they reached the Cours la Reine, he sat down again and said: "I beseech you, madame, to give me plain answers to my questions. Did you see Mlle. Geneviève Ernemont just now, at about 4 o'clock?" "Geneviève? Yes. I was dressing to go out." Did she tell you of the advertisement about Steinweg in the Journal?" "She did." "And it was that which made you come to see me?" "Yes." "Were you alone during Mlle. Ernemont's visit?" "Upon my word, I can't say. Why?" "Recollect, was one of your servants present?" "Probably, as I was dressing." "What are their names?" "Suzanne and Gertrude." "One of them has red hair, has she not?" "Yes, Gertrude." "Have you known her long?" "Her sister has always been with me. And so has Gertrude, for years. She is devotion and honesty personified." "In short, you will answer for her?" "Oh, absolutely." "Very well, very well." It was 7:30 and the daylight was beginning to wane when the taxi cab reached the House of Retreat. Without troubling about his companion, the chief detective rushed into the porter's lodge. "Mrs. Kesselbach's maid has just come in, has she not?" "Whom do you mean, the maid?" "Why, Gertrude, one of the two sisters." "But Gertrude can't have been out, sir. We haven't seen her go out." "Still, some one has just come in." "No, sir, we haven't opened the door to anybody since, let me see, 6 o'clock this evening." "Is there no other way out than this gate?" "No. The walls surround the estate on every side; and they are very high." "Mrs. Kesselbach, we will go to your house, please." They all three went. Mrs. Kesselbach, who had no key, rang. The door was answered by Suzanne, the other sister. "Is Gertrude in?" asked Mrs. Kesselbach. "Yes, ma'am, in her room." "Send her down, please," said the chief detective. After a moment Gertrude came downstairs, looking very attractive and engaging in her white embroidered apron. She had, in point of fact, a rather pretty face, crowned with red hair. M. Lenormand looked at her for a long time without speaking, as though he were trying to read what lay behind those innocent eyes. He asked her no questions. After a minute, he simply said: "That will do, thank you. Come, Gourel." He went out with the sergeant and, at once, as they followed the darkling paths of the garden, said: "That's the one." "Do you think so, chief? She looked so placid." "Much too placid. Another would have been astonished, would have wanted to know why I sent for her. Not this one. Nothing but the concentrated effort of a face that is determined to smile at all costs. Only, I saw a drop of perspiration trickle from her temple along her ear." "So that?" "So that everything becomes plain. Gertrude is in league with the two ruffians who are conspiring round the Kesselbach case, in order either to discover and carry out the famous scheme, or to capture the widow's millions. No doubt, the other sister is in the plot as well. At 4 o'clock, Gertrude, learning that I know of the advertisement in the Journal, takes advantage of her mistress's absence, hastens to Paris, finds Ribeira and the man in the soft hat and drags them off to the Palais, where Ribeira annexes Master Steinweg for his own purposes." He reflected and continued: "All this proves, first, the importance which they attach to Steinweg and their fear of what he may reveal. Secondly, that a regular plot is being hatched around Mrs. Kesselbach. Thirdly, that I have no time to lose, for the plot is ripe." "Very well," said Gourel, "but one thing remains unexplained. How was Gertrude able to leave the garden in which we now are and to enter it again, unknown to the porter and his wife?" "Through a secret passage which the rogues must have contrived to make quite recently." "And which would end, no doubt," said Gourel, "in Mrs. Kesselbach's house." "Yes, perhaps," said M. Lenormand, "perhaps. But I have another idea." They followed the circuit of the wall. It was a bright night; and, though their two forms were hardly distinguishable, they themselves could see enough to examine the stones of the walls and to convince themselves that no breach, however skilful, had been effected. "A ladder, very likely?" suggested Gourel. "No, because Gertrude is able to get out in broad daylight. A communication of the kind I mean can evidently not end out of doors. The entrance must be concealed by some building already in existence." "There are only the 4 garden houses," objected Gourel, "and they are all inhabited." "I beg your pardon, the third, the Pavillon Hortense, is not inhabited." "Who told you so?" "The porter. Mrs. Kesselbach hired this house, which is near her own, for fear of the noise. Who knows but that, in so doing, she acted under Gertrude's influence?" He walked round the house in question. The shutters were closed. He lifted the latch of the door, on the off chance. The door opened. "Ah, Gourel, I think we've struck it. Let's go in. Light your lantern. Oh, the hall, the drawing room, the dining room. That's no use. There must be a basement, as the kitchen is not on this floor. This way, chief. The kitchen stairs are here." They went down into a rather large kitchen, crammed full of wickerwork garden chairs and flower stands. Beside it was a wash house, which also served as a cellar, and which presented the same untidy sights of objects piled one